pop quiz on the Enlightenment coming up. And you need to connect those ideas to what actually happened in history.
Not just names and dates, though, right?
You got it. But don't worry, we've got you covered.
We'll help you understand how those big ideas actually changed the world.
Exactly. So the Enlightenment, it was this incredible period where thinkers were like, hey, let's use logic and reason to figure out the world and us humans.
Yeah. It was a big shift from the Renaissance.
Oh, how so?
Well, the Renaissance was all about the physical world, you know?
Right.
But the Enlightenment was about understanding ourselves.
Makes sense. Okay, so one of the most radical ideas that came out of this was deism.
It was like the religion of reason.
Okay, so what's different about deism compared to other religions?
Well, deists believed in God, but like a God who created the world and was like, peace out, I'm done.
So no miracles or divine intervention.
Exactly. Just pure creation and then letting the universe run its course.
So that puts a lot of responsibility on humans, huh?
For sure. It's like God's a clockmaker, right? Designs this crazy clock, winds it up, and says, all right, humans, good luck keeping this thing ticking.
Wow, that's a powerful image. And wasn't Thomas Jefferson a deist?
He was one of the founding fathers of the United States.
That's pretty wild for that time.
Yeah. And he even made his own version of the Bible, took out anything about miracles.
He did.
Oh, yeah. To him, Jesus was a great moral teacher, but not divine.
Interesting. Okay, moving on to John Locke. He was all about natural rights. Life, liberty, and property. Ring a bell.
Those were huge, especially when it came to revolution.
That's right. So Locke believed those rights belonged to every human being, not given by a king or government.
Exactly. And get this. He said the purpose of government was to protect those rights. If it didn't, people had the right to overthrow it.
Whoa, that is revolutionary. And wasn't that basically what went down in England with the Glorious Revolution in 1688?
Totally. Parliament was like, you're fired to the king, and brought in a new one who agreed to limits on their power.
Wow. So Locke was pretty optimistic about human nature then.
You could say that, yeah.
But then we've got Baron de Montesquieu, who was a little less sunshine and rainbows.
Right. He had a bit more of a dark view. He believed that everyone, deep down, wants power and can get corrupted by it.
Makes you think.
That's why he came up with this awesome idea. The separation of powers, checks and balances.
Okay, break that down for me.
So instead of giving all the power to one person or group, you split it up between different parts of the government.
Like a power-sharing setup.
Exactly. That way nobody gets too powerful and they keep each other in check. The U.S. government, with the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, came straight from Montesquieu's thinking.
Whoa, that's a huge impact. But didn't he have another idea about the size of a country and its government?
He did. Said that large countries work best with monarchies because it's hard to hear everyone in a big population.
Right.
And that small countries, where it's easier for everyone to participate directly, should go for democracies.
That makes sense.
It's like if you're trying to manage a classroom of, like, 650 students versus a group of 6 class officers.
Yeah, running democracy in that huge class would be crazy.
Right. Montesquieu wasn't saying dictatorships are good, but recognizing that different situations might need different types of governments.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now on to Voltaire, another Enlightenment rock star.
Yeah.
He was all about religious tolerance, right?
Big time. And he had strong opinions on the dangers of religious fanaticism.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, he'd seen firsthand the awfulness of religious wars and persecution, believed people should be free to practice their faith without fear.
Absolutely.
And he was really critical of organized religion, how it was used to justify violence and oppression.
Right.
He used historical examples like the 30 Years' War to prove his point.
Yeah, those conflicts were devastating.
He saw them as completely wasteful and driven by intolerance and fanaticism.
Sad but true.
You know, his ideas about religious freedom are still incredibly relevant, especially with all the diversity in the world today.
For sure. Think about the separation of church and state here in the U.S. Super important.
No one religion can dominate the government or mess with other people's rights.
Voltaire would be proud. Okay, last but not least, Adam Smith, the father of modern capitalism. He believed that humans are naturally economic thinkers.
Yeah, like it's in our DNA to make choices based on what we need and want.
So true.
He said that even from when we're little, we're making economic decisions, like trading cookies with your siblings. That's Adam Smith at work.
Huh. That's a great point.
And he believed government should basically stay out of the economy. Let free trade and competition run the show.
Hands-off approach.
Laissez-faire economics, they call it. Let the invisible hand of the market work its magic. prosperity for all.
Sounds good, but what about the downsides?
Oh, yeah. Unregulated capitalism can have some nasty consequences.
Like what?
Sweatshops, worker exploitation, hurting the environment. There needs to be a balance between freedom and ethics. Still a hot topic today.
There's no such thing as a free lunch,
Yeah.
right? Everything comes with a cost.
That's it. Even something like buying a snack at the airport. You complain about the crazy prices,
Oh, I know.
but you pay because at that moment, you want the snack more than you want to save money.
It's true.
It's all about making economic decisions based on what we need and want, like Smith said.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. Deism, natural rights, separation of powers, religious tolerance, free markets. But how did these actually play out in real life, especially in the French Revolution?
Well, that's what we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive. Buckle up, because things are about to get real.
All right, so we've laid down the groundwork, all those big Enlightenment ideas, right? But how did they actually play out in the French Revolution?
It was explosive. It was like all these great Enlightenment ideas, but then they slammed into this really unequal and messed up society.
Oh, wow. Okay, so before we jump into the actual revolution, what about Joseph II of Austria? He was one of those enlightened absolutists, right?
Yeah, but it wasn't quite as simple as like forcing it on everyone.
Okay, so tell me more.
Well, he really believed in Enlightenment principles. He tried to put them in place from the top down, so to speak.
Okay, so what kinds of things did he do?
Well, he abolished serfdom, for one thing.
Whoa.
He promoted religious tolerance, even embraced capitalist ideas.
That's super progressive, especially for back then.
Yeah.
So why didn't it work out?
He got a ton of pushback from the nobles. They saw their power slipping away.
I bet. And what about the everyday people?
It was all too much, too fast for a lot of them.
They weren't ready.
Not really. It just shows that even if you have the best intentions, changing society takes time. It's really tough.
I can imagine. It's like trying to steer a giant ship in a new direction. It takes a lot of work, right? And not everyone's going to be happy about it.
Exactly. Speaking of not being ready for change, let's shift over to France in 1789. Talk about a powder keg.
What was going on?
They were drowning in debt. Harvests had been awful.
So people were hungry.
Oh, yeah, and the inequality was insane. Then you've got King Louis VI and Marie Antoinette.
They weren't exactly known for being, like, in touch with the people, were they?
Not really. Louis was indecisive, more into his hobbies than running a country. And Marie Antoinette, well, her lavish lifestyle didn't exactly win over the masses. Let them eat cake, right?
Yeah, that didn't go over well.
No, not at all. But the core problem was the whole system itself. France was stuck in this rigid hierarchy of the three estates. So you had the first estate, the clergy.
Right.
Less than 1% of the population, but they owned 10% of the land.
And paid no taxes.
Nope, none. Then there was the second estate, the nobility.
Another small sliver of the population.
Yeah, like 1 or 2%. They owned almost 30% of the land. And guess what?
No taxes for them either.
You got it. And who got stuck carrying the whole weight of the system?
I'm guessing the third estate.
Bingo. Everyone else, peasants, workers, merchants, 97% of the population.
And they were the ones paying all the taxes.
All of them. And they had practically zero political power.
No wonder things were about to blow up.
Right. And then within the third estate, there was this group, the bourgeoisie. Educated, middle class, and big fans of Enlightenment ideas.
The doctors, lawyers, that kind of crowd.
Exactly. They were the ones reading Locke, Montesquieu, Voltaire, all about natural rights, separation of powers, freedom of thought. They wanted change.
And they weren't messing around. So let's get to 1789. Louis VI just is desperate for money. Decides to call the estates general.
The first time in over a century and a half, talk about a recipe for disaster.
What was he thinking?
I don't know. But the third estate was not happy. The voting system was rigged against them.
In favor of the first and second estates, right?
Totally. So they decided, forget this, and just formed their own group, the National Assembly, said they were going to write a new constitution for France.
That's the famous tennis court oath.
Yeah.
They were basically saying, we're not going anywhere until things change.
Exactly. It was like, hey, king, your authority, we're challenging it. A turning point, for sure. And then, boom, just weeks later, the people stormed the Bastille.
That's the big one. The symbol of the French Revolution, right? The royal prison.
Yeah, storming the Bastille was like saying, we're not prisoners anymore.
Powerful symbol. So then things got violent.
Yeah, that's when things shifted. And a month later, they adopted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen.
Ah, Locke's ideas come into life.
Right. Liberty, equality, property, all those Enlightenment ideals.
Pretty amazing.
It was a revolutionary document. It inspired movements for freedom all over the world. And then, a few months later, thousands of women marched on Versailles.
Oh yeah, the Women's March on Versailles. They were demanding bread, right?
Yeah, and they forced the royal family to move to Paris, showed that the people were a force to be reckoned with. The monarchy wasn't so untouchable anymore.
Wow. So it feels like things were spiraling pretty fast. So what happened next? Did the revolution, actually succeed?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. In 1791, they finished the new constitution.
Uh,
It created a constitutional monarchy, took away the king's absolute power.
so they didn't, get rid of the king completely.
Nope. It was more like a power-sharing arrangement. Kind of what Montesquieu was talking about. Seemed like a step in the right direction, but it wasn't over yet. The revolution was far from over.
So, we saw how Enlightenment ideas helped kick off the French Revolution. Declaration of the Rights of Man, limits on the king's power. As we wrap up our deep dive here, what are the big things we should remember about the Enlightenment and the French Revolution?
Well, it shows us that ideas, they matter, they have power. Enlightenment ideas like natural rights, separation of powers, they were the spark.
Yeah.
But it also shows how easily those ideas can get messed up, how the desire for a perfect world can lead to some really awful stuff.
It's a good reminder that change is complicated, isn't it?
Absolutely. Revolutions are messy, they're unpredictable, and there's always a price to pay.
That's for sure. But even with all the bad, the French Revolution shows us the power of ideas, that humans can strive for freedom and equality.
Yeah. It's a story about courage, idealism, and the human spirit, you know.
And it reminds us that building a fairer, more just world is a constant struggle. Well, folks, that's a wrap on our deep dive into the Enlightenment and the French Revolution. Hope you learned a thing or two. And hey, good luck on that pop quiz.